Hello, everybody. Welcome to this body language workshop. I'm Malcolm Love, and normally we'd be in a big room somewhere. There'd be loads of you. We'd be doing exercises, and I'd be answering questions, and we'd be working stuff out together. Obviously, we can't do that. Nobody can do that at the moment. So I've got a couple of venues. I'm going to show you a little bit later what happened. I tried to go to the beach, which is about 7 minutes walk from where I live, and I had great fun doing some recording, but the wind noise was terrible, and I tried the same in the garden. I should give a big shout out to my son George, who's here now. So George, take a bow. Okay, thank you very much. Who's helped me with the filming, but we don't have any fancy lapel mics or anything like that. You know, wind reducing stuff. So we're just using a camcorder and the computer in the office. So we're going to have some mixed media here, but hopefully I can make it a bit more interesting than just you watching me talk to a Zoom lens for a while.
I mean, look, how exciting is this? It's mind-blowing, isn't it? If you've ever been misunderstood or misrepresented, spare a thought for poor Albert Mehrabian. Albert Mehrabian is a professor of psychology, a distinguished professor of psychology, professor emeritus at the University of California in Los Angeles. And in the 1960s, he began to do some very important work studying communication, looking particularly at how all the elements of communication work together. So, for example, the verbal content, the words that we say, the tone of voice, the facial expressions that go with that communication. And he wanted to know about what happens when those things are incongruous, that they don't match. What happens then? So if I say something, so I might say something to you like, do you know, I really enjoy working with you. Then hopefully the tone of my voice and my facial expressions go with the words that I've said, and I'm telling you, and hopefully you believe me, that I really enjoy working with you. So what happens if the body language isn't congruent? If the words that I say, the tone of voice that I use, and the facial expressions don't match? So I say something like, yeah, I really enjoy working with you. You're much more likely to believe the way I say that rather than the words that I use. I'm sure you're brilliant to work with, by the way. So this idea of incongruity is very important in body language terms, and it extends to all kinds of things. The way we stand, the way we walk onto a stage, the way we hold the gaze of the audience, the fact we're prepared to look at our audience, and all of those kinds of things say something about our levels of confidence and our credibility and our sincerity, all of that sort of thing. They help us with comic timing and immeasurable number of things. So it's a very important idea. Mehrabian came up with a proportion by which these things are related. And it's sometimes known as the 7%, 38%, 55% rule. It's a big name for a rule. But what he was saying was that people are impacted to the degree of 7% of the words that you say. 38% of the impact is accounted for by the tone of voice, and 55% of the impact is by our facial expressions. Now, it's really important to underscore two things here. First of all, I said, if you've ever been misunderstood, spare a thought for Albert Mehrabian, because he was majorly misunderstood over this issue. You will find in most popular books about body language and communication, you'll see a pie chart where all of this is laid out, the 7%, 38%, 55% rule. What they forget to say is what Albert Mehrabian has said extensively, and you can read it now today on his website, that this rule of proportion only applies when you're talking about short sentences and people are talking about very simple emotions like liking and disliking something. It is simply not true, and I'm very encouraged by this, that people only remember 7% of what we say. But the Moravian rule has often been reduced to saying just that. The bad news is people only remember 7% of what you've said. It's not true. So be encouraged. However, the other bit of this is very important, that body language is incredibly important, and it can amplify and strengthen and enhance the words that we say, or it can significantly detract from them.
The study of body language is called kinesics, and it's a big subject. And you may have come across, there's a Netflix series which features a character based on the psychologist Paul Ekman, who is famous for studying micro gestures, so you can tell if somebody's lying apparently because of the micro gestures and all of that sort of thing. Well, I'm not going to go into any of that. I'm thinking about public speaking and about presenting, what we call being on your feet in front of a live audience, which is better than a dead audience. Boom, boom, my favourite joke. And I'm going to be looking at how we use our hands, how we use our eyes, our voices, about how much we move, all of that kind of thing. And just giving a few tips on how we can improve our body language. Now, here's a big principle. What I don't want to do is to change you, in the sense that I want you to become something other than you actually are. What I say to people when I do training like this is, you need to be bigger for the stage. You need to find your stage self. But pretty much the way you are is what makes you interesting. Your uniqueness, your strangeness, your oddness, your idiosyncrasies and mine are what make us interesting. And wouldn't it be boring if everybody came out of a workshop like this and they all moved in the same way, or had the same kinds of gestures and so on? It would be incredibly boring. So, vive uniqueness. That's very, very good. So we're not robots. And I want to encourage you to be yourself, just bigger. But there may be some things that you want to do less of, and a few things that you want to do more of. So that's the first principle. The second principle is that content is paramount. The last thing I want you to think is that you can patch over bad content just by being a little bit more enthusiastic and vibrant and having better body language. That's nonsense, and I don't want to do that. And one of the ways in which you can become more effective as a public speaker is to get yourself a critically supportive friend. I love that phrase. What it means is somebody who is on your side and who cares about you, but who will tell you exactly what you need to change, at least in their opinion. The reflection that you get from them can be incredibly useful. And there are lots of things, as we will see, that you can change only because you've got a critically supportive friend. I remember when I started training, I was doing some team training, and my colleague came up to me afterwards and she said, "Well, very good, but why do you do this?" And she folded her arms like this and started to walk about. And she was copying me, doing this very, very strange behaviour that I was doing while I was training. And I had no idea that I did it. And she said, "Yes, it looks very weird, and you look like a giant chicken." I have to admit that probably did look like a giant chicken. And I think I was doing it in order to comfort myself. I was thinking, well, look, don't worry, Malcolm, it doesn't matter. Don't be scared. Everything's going to be okay, because this was a completely unfamiliar situation to me. You need people to tell you the truth, but to be kind and to be supportive and to help you develop and
and change. So get yourself a critically supportive friend. Maybe make a pact with a colleague or a friend that the next time you get the chance to be on your feet in front of a live audience, that they will watch simply for the purposes of giving you feedback on how you do it. Not on what you say, but on how you say it. So something I want to do straight away, and you can join in with me if it's possible, you won't find it too embarrassing, is I want to do a warm-up routine. I want to teach you a warm-up routine. So I put my notes down. I borrowed this from an acting coach called Patsy Rodenberg, and actually trainers are always borrowing from each other, so I don't feel very guilty about it. The acting coach, we are not actors, you and I, at least not in this context. We're presenters, and we're speakers, and we have to be ourselves, and actors are being paid to be somebody else. But we can learn a huge amount from actors. And I love this warm-up routine, and I use it a lot. And the reasons are these. First of all, it makes the point that being on your feet in front of a live audience is a very physical activity. It's as physical an activity as acting, or maybe not as much as dancing, as singing. You know, when a person goes out to perform on a stage, they're using their bodies usually. Stand-up comedians are doing it hugely. And so in the same kind of way, I'm reminding you through this warm-up routine that being on your feet in front of a live audience is a physical activity. And secondly, this exercise reminds us that this is the instrument that we use in part. Okay, the words we say are incredibly important, but this instrument, this body that we use is incredibly important. And we're kind of tuning it up and getting it ready. So, glasses are going now because I'm going to just show you how this works. Okay, so there's three parts to it. It's really, really easy. The first one is just to get breathing, and the way we do that is you take an arm, pick an arm, any arm, and just start rolling it around in its socket like that. Okay, just loosen it up. I warn you, if you've ever dislocated a shoulder, go really easy with this exercise. Maybe don't do it this bit at all, because they apparently are notoriously easy to dislocate again. So just go easy on that. But otherwise, roll the arm in its socket like so. Okay. Now you make a fist and you push up and out like that. It's important to keep pushing out as you go, and you start to rotate your arm. Okay, so that's 1 and 2, not too fast, just at a steady pace. That's 3 and that's 4 and that's 5. Easy. Okay, and back again. Nothing too much about this, except I can't do this without opening up my lungs and breathe. I'm breathing on the right-hand side of my body here. Okay, so we do the same on the other side. Start to just roll your arm in its socket like so. Very good. Okay, like creaking is coming from me. Make a fist, push the arm out as you go, start to roll it. A lot of people find that their arms surprisingly feel very different. This is one of those occasions when you really notice that. And roll it back again. And I can't do this without feeling my lungs opened up on my left-hand side. There we go. Okay, enough of that. Second thing is involves me folding myself up vertically. So stay with me, watch this first, and then if you want to, you have a go at it. So I'm going to let my chin fall onto my neck like this, let my hands dangle down by my sides. I'm going to go down like this slowly. I'll probably have to bend my legs because I'm old and decrepit. If you can do it without doing it, well, good for you. But touch your toes. And as you go down, breathe out. And then slowly come back up and breathe in. So watch me as I go, okay? Chin onto the neck. I'm going down, down, down. I'm bending my knees slightly now so I don't strain my back. Touch my toes. Come back up, and I'm breathing in again now. And when I get to the top, I imagine a string
pulling my back up straight like that. Okay. Now I can go back down again. Down, 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 down. Bending my knees slightly, touching my toes, coming back up, breathing in. And when I get to the top, I imagine that string just pulling my back up straight. Great. Okay, so that's the second one. Now, the third one, and I'm just turning on sideways to you here very, very deliberately, is what I call the Superman move, for reasons which will become apparent. And we start off by swinging. Now, when I'm with a large group of people, I say to them, do this, put your arms out like this and turn. And that's not the exercise, it's a spacing device. Make sure that you're not touching anybody or anything. Okay, so if you do this with colleagues at a later date, that's a good thing to do. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to touch anything particularly, and I start to swing my arms. Okay, so I'm feeling my weight on my toes, and I start to swing forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. On the count of 3, I'm going to push my arms up over my head in the manner of Superman. Okay, here we go. So, 1 and 2 and I'm unbalanced here. Let's try again. Forwards, backwards, and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, there we go. So those are the 3 parts. I borrowed that from a famous acting coach. You can use it to good effect, probably privately. Don't do it on stage before you speak to people, but you'll find that it really warms you up very, very well. Okay, the way I normally run this workshop is I ask people to do something like tell us about the thing they're most scared of for 2 minutes. Talk about spiders and things like that. I get people to introduce a colleague. So they find out about a colleague. It's a very good icebreaker. And then they find out about a colleague for, say, 6 minutes. And then they introduce that colleague for around about 90 seconds or whatever. So they stand up and talk to the whole group. And what that does, even though they're not very well prepared and all of that kind of thing, what it does is it provides a certain amount of information, fodder, for us to think about body language issues. What they're really doing in that exercise is one at a time, they're raising issues about body language that we can talk about. And so I'm going to highlight with you some of the key ones that always come out.
The first one is eye contact. We're all used to the advice that you need to make eye contact with your audience. And there's some strange pieces of advice that go around on this subject. It's a little bit difficult to demonstrate this over a camera when really we want to be showing how it works in a hall full of people. But I'll do my best to describe this. Now, when you look out at any audience, you will see people that are looking very warm and friendly and engaged, or just listening with an interested expression on their face. And there'll be some people who look really grim. You know, they look like maybe they hate you. And I can pretty much assure you that it's unlikely that it's anything to do with you. At least it's not personal. And that would be true of any particular audience that you look out at. There are people who just have a resting face, which is really rather grim looking. So there's a weird piece of advice, actually, that's given, which is this. People say, look, if you see people with grim-looking faces, well, that's a little bit disturbing, and that throws you off your game a little bit. So our advice is pick a friendly face. Pick somebody who's smiling and nodding and engaged, because you're getting positive feedback from them, and that makes you feel a little bit better about yourself. The problem with that piece of advice is that it does 2 things simultaneously. First of all, it cuts you off from the rest of the audience. My advice always is to keep your eyes moving around the audience, just catching people quickly, lightly, catching their eyes and looking around the audience. No particular speed or pace to this. I sometimes get asked by engineers this brilliant question: with what frequency should I look at people in the audience? Well, this is a little bit more of an art than a science in this respect. I can't give you numbers for that. I'm not even sure if it would work if I gave you a number. But the idea is just to gently keep your eyes moving around the audience, okay? Because what you're doing is you're saying to people subliminally, and this is why eye contact is so important. You're saying to people subliminally, what I have to say is for you. This is for you. I want you to get it. In fact, if you have that attitude about yourself that you want to connect with that audience, you really want them to get this, then your eyes start communicating that. You become hungry for the attention of the audience as you look around. The other thing that you would achieve by just looking at a friendly face is that you persecute those poor souls in the audience who make the big mistake of looking at you and looking interested. There's nothing what you will have had this listening to lecturers or sometimes to speakers who just fasten on you and start talking at you, and you have to take an inordinate interest in your shoes or something in the hope that they'll go away and leave you alone. So eye contact is incredibly powerful because it says what I have to say is for you. Now, let's just deal with something else. What happens if the audience gets bigger? I mean, it's okay to talk to 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people now. This is a whole new ballgame. How do we keep our eyes moving around them? How do we catch their eyes? Well, it turns out that by the miracle of geometry, as you look at a steadily increasing audience, if you catch someone's eye, the 20 people sitting around them think that you're looking at them as well. So the effect is maintained, and it helps you build rapport and connection with the audience as quickly as you can. One of the ways you can try and get out of yourself is to get looking at the audience in order to tell them eagerly what it is, what you want them to know.
Sometimes people are unconsciously very, very closed down in their body language. So this is often just a function of nervousness and anxiety. And you could easily do this yourself. If you stand up for a moment, if you're in a position to do that, or you want to do that, and you stand up and you imagine that you're having to do something really nerve-wracking, something that makes you really nervous. The anxiety is palpable. You're in an unfamiliar situation, you're not quite sure what's going to happen. What do you look like? Well, usually people, if you play act being nervous, you may not get all of it, but you'll get some of it. Normally, if people are really nervous, something like this is going on. Our voice tends to be a bit down, a bit low level. We might avoid eye contact, so we'll look away, we'll look at the floor, we'll do anything but look properly at the audience. We'll glaze over, we won't connect. We'll probably have our shoulders a bit hunched. We may even stoop a little bit. Our legs would tend to be quite close together. And that not only looks uncomfortable, but what it's screaming is that I am closing myself down and I'm closing myself away from you. I think what we're doing is making ourselves a smaller target. Now, another way to think about this is that there's like a giant test tube has come down over the top of us and we're inside of it. And the test tube is there because we have learned to fear judgment. So we close down inside of it. And it's really hard for us, and we're really quite uncomfortable. So the degree to which we can break out of the test tube is the degree to which we can better connect with the audience.
I'm going to assert, on the basis of good advice from neuroscientists, that there is such a thing as a body language confidence feedback loop. That's a term I've given to it. So it works like this. When I am nervous, I give off unconfident body language. So all of the things that we've been talking about, I'll have my feet and my legs quite close together. My upper body will be closed down. I might even tend to hunch. My voice level may drop. I will avoid eye contact. All of those kinds of things, which any of us can look at somebody doing that and go, wow, that person doesn't look very confident. But the mind is basically giving off these signals to the body to be a smaller target, essentially. Weirdly, if you do the reverse, if you deliberately break down your body language and you say, okay, when I'm at my best, when I'm at my most confident, let's say, how do I look? Well, I open up my body language. My body is more open to the audience. I will look at the audience. I'll engage them with my eyes. I'll stand with my feet slightly further apart. I'll relax. I'll move deliberately, but more slowly, and so on. All of these kinds of things that we've been talking about. When we do that, then the body is sending signals to the mind and saying, actually, mind, everything's okay.
So something we should talk about now is voice. There's a big difference between shouting and raising your voice. Shouting is like that. Hello, my name is Malcolm and I'm going to shout at you for half an hour. Is weird. And the voice is kind of all generated up here. It's coming from here. What we need to do is generate the voice from down here. Actors and singers talk about thinking the voice down inside the body, using the diaphragm and generating it from there. And simply thinking about that, thinking about your voice emanating from here is incredibly helpful all by itself. You can practice this, you can play with this. But just thinking about it is a powerful thing to do. So I can raise my voice and I can speak quite a bit more loudly without actually resorting to shouting. I can make my voice reach right to the back of the hall without actually shouting at the audience because I'm generating the voice from down here. Feels a bit weird doing that in the front room, but still, there we go. So that's the first thing to say about voice. The second thing is this, and I think this, by the way, this little tip I'm going to give you about all kinds of aspects of body language, but just focus on the voice for the moment. We use a range of our voice like this, let's say, but we have available to us a range like that. It's just that we're in the habit of having this range. This is all us too. All the rest of this is us. It's authentically us. We just don't do it. We don't use it. And now I'm not just talking about level of voice. I'm talking about the timbre and the pitch and the tone of our voice. So one of the things that we can do to expand the range of our voice is to play. In fact, play is the secret to a lot of this. Becoming unself-conscious enough to play with various aspects of our body language. So, for example, you may find a quiet place where you are not likely to be disturbed, and you can sing madly. You can sing very loud, you can sing very high, you can sing very low, and just see, as you stretch your voice in that way, the effect of it. You'll notice that you've got more range than maybe you thought you had. What about doing impressions of people, mad impressions of people? They don't have to be good impressions. But what it does is it enables you by playing to stretch the way you use your voice. And you think, wow, you hear yourself doing it. You hear the facility that you have. And it's not such a stretch then to be able to introduce some of that range in the way that you use your voice when you're speaking in public. So I'm not, of course, suggesting that you turn your presentations into a music hall act or stand-up comedy act or anything of the sort. That's not what I mean. That's not the point. But the point is that you're discovering the range, what your voice can do when you need to do it.
Now, we could spend days talking about exercises that would help us improve our voices. But here's an exercise which works on a number of levels, which I'd like to suggest to you. And it still involves a kind of carefree kind of play. You find a quiet place and you're prepared to play with this idea. Find yourself a children's book, okay? So this is Madeline's Christmas by this fellow here, and I'm going to read an excerpt from it. Now, when you start to read, you can hear your voice in a way we don't normally listen to our voice. Record it if you want to, and you begin to feel some of your range being tested. If your voice is sounding a little bit flat, because if you were reading to a real child, the child would be very demanding. You know, they would start saying things to you like, "The frog does not speak like that," and so on. If you find your voice beginning to sound a little bit flat, we'll try and brighten it a little bit. So I'm going to come somewhere in the middle of this story just for the sake of illustration. And so it begins, it was the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even the mouse. For, like everyone else in that house, which was old, the poor mouse was in bed with a miserable cold. Okay, now, if I am prepared to play with that, I can bring out the meaning and I can have some fun with it. I've got to be patient and I've got to be prepared to play. Okay? And only our brave little Madeline was up and about and feeling just fine. Suddenly came a knock which made her pause. Could it perhaps be Santa Claus? But no, a rug merchant was at the door. He had 12 rugs. He had no more. Now, at the moment, I'm just reading, trying to bring out the meaning. But now we've got voices. Why these? Said Madeline. Sorry, start that again. Why these, said Madeline, would be so neat for our ice cold in the morning feet. It seems to me. Let's try again. I'm just going to try again. Okay. Could it perhaps be Santa Claus? But no, a rug merchant was at the door. He had 12 rugs. He had no more. Why, these, said Madeline, would be so neat for our ice cold in the morning feet. So, trying a bit of a voice there, slightly raised. Hope you noticed that I tried that. It seems to me, said Miss Clavel, that you have chosen very well. Madeline gave him, that's the rug seller, a handful of francs. Here they are, with all our thanks. Without the rugs which he had sold, the rug merchant got awfully cold. To sell my rugs, he cried, was silly. Without them, I am very chilly. He wants to get them back, but will he? Now, that voice sounded a bit like Miss Clavel as well, so I'm going to change that. To sell my rugs, he cried, was silly. Without them, I am very chilly. And so there you go. I'm prepared to play around with my voice. I can try and extend my range. And it's amazing practice for confidence, for hearing your voice, for knowing what you sound like, for extending your range.
Okay, let's talk about pace and movement. So, as a general rule, and this will come as no surprise, the further away you are from an audience, the more you can move. Sometimes, of course, we see people, we do this exercise that I've been talking about, you'll see people being animated and giving off lots of energy and moving around quite a bit. So as long as you're not too close to people, the fact that you're moving is not too bothersome. But sometimes movement anyway is annoying. And why is that? Well, I remember talking to an actor friend of mine a long time ago about this. And I was saying, I can't quite figure out why people, even though they're giving off quite a lot of energy, sometimes seem quite annoying when they're presenting. And she said something very interesting. She said, if I pick something up and I'm holding it on stage, I suddenly pick it up and I'm holding it so the audience can see it. They are thinking to themselves subliminally, why is she doing that? Why is she holding that thing? What's she going to do with it? And she said, if she moves from back right stage to front left stage, the audience subliminally is thinking, why? What's the purpose of this? What's going on? And then I was able to make the connection with this kind of exercise. If somebody is moving around in a kind of pointless kind of way, just moving for the sake of moving, all that they're really doing is burning off energy. And that may be entertaining for a while and a bit eccentric and so on, but actually, ultimately, it's a bit disconcerting and possibly irritating to the audience. So we need to bear that in mind, and the antidote to it is to try and move as much as possible in a purposeful kind of way. And I'm going to say a little bit more about our movements in just a second or two, but let's stick with this idea of movement and pace. And we can add energy into that for a moment. Let me give you an illustration about how energy and pace changes the impact and effect of a presentation. So let me give you this example of a sentence I'm going to deliver in two completely different ways. Okay. The first way is this. Imagine we are at a UNHCR conference. We're talking about children's rights. And I might get very animated and say, ladies and gentlemen, the decisions that we make today in this conference will affect a whole generation of children. You might think, well, that guy's very animated and very excited and he really believes what he's saying. Or you might think I'm overacting. But that's one way to do it. Lots of energy, lots of pace going on there. But what about this? I'm going to use exactly the same words. Ladies and gentlemen, the decisions that we make today in this conference will affect a whole generation of children. The point that I'm trying to make is not that one way is better than another, but simply that playing with pace has an impact on your delivery, on your audience. And I think slowing down, being more deliberate, acting like you are heavier than you actually are, actually says, this is serious, I mean business, take notice. Sometimes we worry about what will we do with our hands, Your hands feel like great big bunches of bananas just hanging there sometimes when you're giving public talks. We think, what shall we do with them? Well, of course, people hold things. So, pointers for screens and things like that, cling on to lecterns of desks, that kind of stuff. But actually, there are a few things that you can do with your hands that are very positive and that help you express yourself.
I have an analogy, I think, which helps with this. Think of a really well laid out page of a magazine, a periodical, something like that. When you look at it, you see lots of space. You see bold headlines, some type larger than others. You see things laid out in paragraphs. You can see what belongs to what. There may be an inset. All kinds of things are going on, But whatever it is, it's not confusing if it's done properly. You can see the structure. You can see what's going on. Now, for a public speaker, the way we do that, one of the ways we do that is we use our voices in combination with our hands, for example, to say, now, the first thing to get straight is, and we use our hands to give a bold headline, or we say, this is a key idea, bold headline, solid type, just saying, this matters, this is important, this is a big theme, and we're headlining a section, and everything that follows after that is detailing that section.
If I was to say to you, earlier on we've been thinking about body language, later on we'll be talking about storytelling, then what I've done with my hands, subliminally, but now I've told you about it, it's not subliminal anymore, while you're watching me, I've said, by using the air around me, this is one thing and this is something else. I'm breaking up the page. So this is one subject, this is another subject. And good speakers do this almost naturally all the time. They are at pains to break the page up for you, to help you see the structure. So however you do it, whatever gestures are natural for you, notice that you can use the air around your body to break up the shape of the talk. So the last thing I want to talk about is miming. And I'm not suggesting that you go on stage and pretend to be Marcel Marceau. I know that's a very old reference now, but he's a famous mime artist, and start doing all this kind of thing, pretending there's glass. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is that you could say, well, it was a really hot day, which it is today outside. I went sat outside down in the garden, and I poured myself a nice long cold beer. That little bit of miming is inherently more interesting. If I say, well, I went and sat outside in the garden and I poured myself a nice long cold beer, there's nothing wrong with that, but this brings it to life a little bit. So without overdoing it, without becoming strange in our gestures, we can have a look at the things that we're saying and seeing if we can enhance them a little bit, just by adding, on occasion, a little bit of mime.
So we're coming now to the end of our workshop on body language, and we've covered a lot of territory. We've been thinking about, well, everything from warming up to the way we use our voices, to eye contact, to using our hands, to the pace of the pace of the talk, the speed at which we move, all of those kinds of things. And if I were you, my head would be buzzing with lots of things that would actually worry me, because I'd be thinking, well, but I've got to focus on the meaning of what I'm saying. I've got to think about the words that I'm going to deliver. And adding in on top of that, a whole layer about body language could become very confusing. And I'm afraid that if I did try to do something, then my body language would be wooden. Well, I've got a couple of top tips which I think may really help you, because you're completely right about that concern. So let me see if this will help. My first top tip is to encourage you to become a connoisseur of body language. Now, I've been at pains to say we're not actors, but we can borrow a lot from actors. And I often tease some of my actor friends by saying to them, if they see somebody, say, in a public place who seems to be distressed, crying or something like that, they will watch them. And their first concern is not to comfort them, but to copy them. But I'm sure they're very nice people, and if appropriate, they'd probably comfort them as well. But we can apply a similar principle as public speakers, as presenters, is to notice when we see a speaker who impresses us, somebody that we enjoy listening to, we find them easy to listen to, they are compelling in some way. What is it that they do? And I'm thinking particularly now in terms of body language. Why not make notes not only about what they say, but about what they do when they're presenting. What movements do they employ? What gestures do they employ? What is it about them that we appreciate? And is there a way we can copy and practice what they do that we find so useful? So become a connoisseur of body language. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is to add in an extra process. Now, you may do this already, but if you don't, add in this extra process I'm going to describe to you when you are preparing. So normally when we prepare to give a talk, we've got a clear purpose for giving the talk. We do our research, we think about the results that we want, what do we want our audience to know, and possibly what do we want our audience to do as a result of hearing our presentation, our public talk. And we then have some kind of logical path laid down, and we will add in illustrations, PowerPoint slides, physical exhibits, all kinds of things that you might employ. Somehow you'll have a script. It'll either be something you've remembered, maybe you've made notes down on a piece of paper, maybe you've written a full script, maybe your talk is queued up by a set of PowerPoint slides. Well, however you've created your script, the problem with a script, whether it's memorized or physical or queued up by PowerPoint slides, is that a script really is something which is designed to be read. And your audience is going to see you and hear you. In other words, you need to create something that is designed to be seen and heard. So this extra process that I'm going to talk about for just a second now is something which I think separates okay speakers from really good speakers. And I always find some version of this when I talk to people about their process, people that I admire as speakers. What they do is, having prepared the talk as far as we've described it, they add in this process where they begin to play, there's that word again, play, with the different ideas. Let's say you're going to give an illustration about a cat, for example. Well, how will you get into that? Do you just have the word cat written on a piece of paper? Okay, well, what are you going to do about that? Well, you need to play with the way you talk about it. You would be able to give your illustration about the cat, no problem. But to give it in such a way that it has impact, that it creates the effect that you want, and so on, you need to spend time with it and play with it. So instead of just the line, tell the story about the cat, think how you're going to get into that and how you're going to get out of it, how you're going to start it, how you're going to finish it, what kind of detail you're going to add, and talk it. Talk it out loud. Talk it out loud to an imaginary audience. Pace around. Do the body language that comes naturally to you as you are playing freely without being watched by anybody. Chat away. And there will come a moment, surprisingly quickly, as you go through each section of your talk, there'll come a moment when you'll go, that's it. That's what I'll say. And that's the moment where you make a note to yourself so that you can remember how you did it, so that you have a chance to repeat it. And so what I'm really saying is, create your working script, your final script, your talking script, the thing that you use to help you deliver your talk. Create that by talking. Create your talk by talking. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you found this useful. Very best wishes for the rest of the forum.